So we start off this unit talking about two different laws of exponents, and talking about simplifying them. You're going to need to have your graphing calculators out. We're going to go through a process of how to input some of this information into our graphing calculator. So you guys are going to complete this table. I'll go through a few of the examples with you. This says take 2 to the power of n, and n is 3, so the numbers up in the top row are going to be your n's, or your exponents. 2 to the third power in my calculator, I'd press the 2, and then I'm going to use this caret key to go to my exponent, and then 3, and hit enter. I get 8. So if n were equal to 2, I would do 2 to the second power. So in my calculator, I can just use the exponent of 2 for that one, and hit enter, and we get 4. Okay. We're going to do that for all of them, but let's talk real quick about this one. If I have a negative exponent, so 2 to the negative first, if I have n equals -1, there's no difference in what I do in my calculator. I just do 2 caret, use the negative button, and then 1, and hit enter. I've got a decimal here. For this entire table, anytime you get a decimal, make it a fraction. So that's when we use our math button. I do math. I choose number 1, which is frac, and then I hit enter. That gives me an answer of 1/2. So 2 to the negative first is really 1/2. Go ahead and fill out the rest of the table. This whole row here, it's going to be 3 to the power of n, in this case third power. This is going to be 4 to the third power, 5 to the third power, and so on. Complete the entire table. So press pause now, use your graphing calculators to fill in the answers. Any decimals should be converted into fractions. So this is what our table should look like. 2 to the third is 8, 2 to the fourth is 4, 2 to the first is 2, 2 to the 0 is 1, 2 to the negative 1/2, or -1 is 1/2, 2 to the negative 2 is 1/4, and then 1/8. And then we get 27, 9, 3, 1, 1/3, 1/9, and 1/27. 64, 16, 4, 1, 1/4, 1/16, and 1/64. 125, 25, 5, 1, 1/5, 1/25, and 1/125. This illustrates two of our major exponent properties that we're going to study today. First of all, if you take a look at this table, what happens when any of these numbers have an exponent of 0? That's right. An exponent of 0, every time that's this column here, our answer is 1. Anything to the power of 0 equals 1. This one can be a little trickier to see, but what happens every time we have a negative exponent? For example, look closely at this and this. When I have 2 to the positive first power, my answer is 2. But 2 to the negative first power, probably works better if I highlight the correct one, I get 1/2. Picking a different one, 4 to the second power, I get 16. But if I make it a negative second power, I get 1/16. 5 to the positive third is 125. 5 to the negative third is 1/125. So what's really happening here is we're getting reciprocals. The negative exponent is the reciprocal of the positive exponent. And we'll put that in different words a little bit later on in our notes. But that's generally what's happening here. Let's take a look at some examples. This is an important idea. Generally, our rule is anything raised to the 0 power is 1. However, you have to be extremely careful because only an exponent applies only to its base. So if I say x to the 0, then x is my base, 0 is my exponent. Okay. Well, that's great. This 0 applies to its base, 2, so my answer is 1. Okay. But just like in our first chapter when we were dealing with squaring things, parentheses versus no parentheses, same thing happens here. The base for this 0 is 2. I can only apply it to the 2. So while the answer here is 1, to that, I have a negative in front of it. I have to bring this. My answer there is negative 1. Different than example 2, or this third problem here, because now my exponent of 0 applies to the parentheses, and all of it is in parentheses. This answer is 1. Very important distinction. The parentheses dictate that it is all 1. Different here, because the parentheses don't include that negative. Since the parentheses don't include that negative, my answer is 1 for the 2 in the parentheses to the 0 power, but negative because the negative's out in front. Go ahead and press pause again and try to complete the other 8 problems here. Then unpause it to check your work. So the pattern held true here. Everything in these 2 problems here was raised to the 0 power. The answer is 1. Here, the negative is not raised to the 0 power, so my answer is negative 1. Negative inside the parentheses, I get a positive 1. Negative outside, I get a negative 1. Okay. On our next page, it talks about how we can use 0 exponents with variables as well. Here are some of the things that you'll see in the cases that you'll need to consider. Just like with our problems before, this exponent of 0 is applying only to the x. I cannot apply it to the 3, so it's kind of like an order of operations problem. That simplifies to 1, but the 3 comes down, and that's multiplication. 3x is 3 times x. So my answer here is 3. Okay, the next one is very similar. The 0 is only applying to the x because there's no parentheses. That gives me a 1, so I have negative 10 times 1. My answer is negative 10. The last 2 examples are different because the 0 is applying to the parentheses there. And since everything is in the parentheses, this entire answer becomes 1. I'm not multiplying anything. Distinct difference that you have to pay close attention to. Similar but different in the next example. It applies to the parentheses. So those parentheses become 1, but we have that negative in front still. That's a negative 1. Okay, now these problems look extremely challenging, and especially the first one is quite simple. If you look at it close enough, that 0 applies to those parentheses, which means I don't care what at all is inside of it. The parentheses are raised to the 0 power, my answer is 1. It's that simple. The next one's not quite as simple, but it's close. The parentheses are what's being applied, or is what that 0 exponent is being applied to, which again means I don't care what's inside of there. What's inside of there is now simplifying to 1, but I do have to multiply it by this negative 10 that was not included in the parentheses, giving me an answer of negative 10. go ahead and watch our next video. We're going to start talking about negative exponents and do a handful of examples with those.